What happens when the defining moment of a setting doesn't happen? That's what you wanted to know in today's Welcome to Mystara. As you selected, what happens to the Savage Coast if Wrath of the Immortals doesn't happen? It's a fair question. Wrath is the base breaker of Mystara, as it changes the known world by eliminating the tensions there. In Red Steel, it's supposed to be the start of the tensions, as the red curse spreads across the region when the spell keeping it in check fails. So how does the setting function if the legacies are never unleashed? How do I do this review when one book completely ignores what the other book says? Warning, this review kind of goes off the rails, but I'm Mr. Welch and it's time to get hypothetical. The biggest issue with the Red Steel book is that it was actually released after the Almanacs, which would have answered a lot of these questions. But the first Poor Wizard's Almanac was released in 92, Red Steel doesn't hit the shelves until 94, so the nations there never get a mention. They didn't even exist officially. What they did arrive to was all sorts of continuity errors, including the same book, including the same paragraphs in the same book. Trying to piece together the Savage Coast before Wrath is a bit of a problem because of all these errors. A quick historical summary is that 1500 years ago, three curses merged to create the Red Curse, which plagues the Savage Baronies with their legacies and mutations. Each curse had something to do with a nation overstepping their bounds and turning on an ally or neighbor. The Nithians were cursed for all sorts of sins, and one of their efforts was to mass create an alloy that could be turned into magical weapons. That led to the creation of Cinnabril. Then the Man-Scorpions betrayed the Unduks, the Flying Minotaurs, and that led to the creation of the Legacies. Lastly, the Aranea betrayed the Wallara, and that led to a very pissed-off dragon immortal coating the area with vermeil, the magic dust that renders most divination magic useless on the coast. Combined, you had the Red Curse, complete with mutations and special powers and everything turning red. But fortunately, the curse was kept to a small area known as the Savage Baronies. Fast forward to present day with Wrath of the Immortals. The Week of Dread finally happens, and magic fails across the globe. The spells used by the Aranea to keep the Red Curse at bay fail completely, and then the Goblin tribes attack them when they are at the weakest and destroy the capital. The Red Curse was suppressed during this week, along with all other magic, but when the week ended, the wards that kept it in place had been destroyed. The curse spread like a virus to cover most of the Savage Coast before the Aranea could restore the spells to hold the curse in place. So that raises the question, what happens if Rad doesn't activate his Doomsday device and the Aranea wards never fail? First off, for the Savage Baronies, nothing changes. The curse was already there for centuries. They had endured and it survived. The curse didn't get worse for them after the spread. They still mine for Cinnabril and create magic weapons and firearms from other related substances caused by the curse. The Inheritors are still going to try to eliminate the Red Steel smugglers, the County of Cimarron is still going to ignore them, and the feuding baronies are going to start countless border wars as normal. Looking at the other nations is when the summary gets difficult because the spread of the Red Curse, according to the map on page 52 of the campaign book, differs wildly in the description of the curse in the nations book. For example, the nation of Robrin, which relies heavily on its druids, mentions that it has little use for Cinnabril in the section of trade. The problem with that, however, shows that the entire nation is covered by the effects of the Red Curse, specifically being Region 2 on the chart. Ah, continuity errors. Thy name is Mystara. Regardless of that problem, Robrin wouldn't be that bothered with the lack of the curse, as the nation keeps to itself and happily trades with outside nations, recruiting workers from other nations when needed. Their only hostile actions outside their own borders is a combined war against the Yazak Goblins. Because of the large number of druids, citizens from the Savage Baronies looking to escape the curse would probably look at Robrin first as their primary destination to have the curse removed. Then we look at Uzdria, which again is completely covered by the Red Curse in the guidebook and seemingly unaffected by it in the nation book. The nation has a high number of half-elves, so if you go with the 1005 origins of the half-elf, who would have immigrated there sometime in the century since the creation of the curse. Uzdria has long been at war with the Yazak Goblins with Robrin, although a large field of amber lotus flowers that stretch across the northern border prevents Uzdria from properly retaliating. Without the Red Curse, the resources that Uzdria would have had to invest to prevent its population from mutating could instead be used in the war, assuming they would ally with neighboring Renardi to allow them to bypass the amber lotus fields and hit the Yazak Goblins in the flank. Then moving west to the nation of Renardi, where I immediately find another error, where the paragraph talking about how the Lupin not only found a way to remove the lotus flowers from the territory, but retake chunks of goblin lands caused a massive retaliation by the goblins, but the catfolk held their ground. So apparently proofreading in this book was not much of a priority. Again, the map says this area is affected by the Red Curse, but the description of the nation has no mention at all of being affected by the curse. The Savage Baronies talk in detail about how each nation handles the curse and they're afflicted, but not a word about either in any of the other nations. It's like the curse was originally supposed to be only in the Savage Baronies, and then somebody decided to spread it across the rest of the coast and forgot to tell the guy writing the book to change that fact. So Renardi loves wine and hates goblins. Considering Uzdria hates the goblins as well, and Renardi gives them away to attack the goblins, now the war against the goblins involves 3 nations. The nation of Belane is controlled by Rakasta, who have never stopped fighting the goblins. There's little else mentioned about it. They occasionally spar with the Lupin over reconquered territories, but since they can access the Yazak steppes without difficulty, they could easily join the war against the goblins and make it a 4-nation coalition. The territorial disputes between the Lupin and Rakasta could be settled by the Druids of Robran, who make it a specialty of theirs to mediate disputes. The lizard folk nations of Shazak, Ator, and Kay have stayed stagnant because of the nature of the lizardmen, gatormen, and caymen. The gatormen, or Gorash, will attack anyone who look weak to them, like when the lizardmen have tried to attack the Rakasta, only to have the Gorash immediately attack them on their border. The lizard folk constantly bicker and squabble between each other, but any attack on one causes the neutral party to jump into the conflict, causing their petty wars to turn into a standoff every single time. Lizard folk aren't bothered by the Red Curse, and regardless of their future, it's not going to change one bit. The one nation that does have a noticeable change without Wrath of the Immortals is the nation of Herath. In the original timeline, their capital being destroyed is the catalyst for the spread of the Red Curse. Without the Week of Dread, the spiders keep their magic, the goblins are heavily repulsed. This means the spiders can keep their plots going, though they would definitely turn on the goblins along with the other 4 nations. The biggest change is the Aranea would provide covert magic support than actual troops. The rest of the nations wouldn't even know they have a 5th ally in the war. However, once the goblins are defeated, the spiders do intend to fully push back against the Rakasta, who claim woods also claimed by the Aranea. You know what? This topic sounded like a great idea in my head until I started reading the Red Steel book in full and realized it's one huge continuity error. The map of the Red Curse in the campaign book shows that the Red Curse stretches almost to the Arm of the Immortal on the far western side of the continent, all the way to the tip of the Savage Baronies. It encompasses almost every single nation on the Savage Coast, and it gives what region and what versions of the curse will be affecting each of them. However, in the Lands of the Savage Coast book, not one of the nations addresses the fact that their entire population is cursed and dependent on this magical metal that doesn't occur in most of the nations. That is something I believe that the nations would mention once or twice in their initial write-up on how they handle the fact that their entire population is on life support. I seriously believe that the curse was meant to be restricted to the Savage Baronies, and somebody at TSR decided that it was going to affect everybody, and forgot to tell the original author about the changes to the Nation book. To sum up the changes, the baronies are already cursed, so they're not going to be affected by any changes. The other nations, freed from having to keep their population from mutating to death, gang up and destroy the Yazak goblins, and they have to agree to how to split up the newly acquired territories. To replace this topic, I'm pulling another one from the back of the queue, the Immortals of Time. So until next week, seriously, if anybody knows what happened during the making of this book, please contact me. I am all ears on how you've got 2 different books in the same box set contradicting each other very blatantly and quite often.